Let's create a budget. Let's get out of debt. Let's build wealth. Guys, welcome back to the channel. So we've been dissecting velocity banking and understanding that, velocity banking in itself, interest rates, length of loans, like how that affects it. But we're starting to dig a little bit into human emotion and human involvement and how that affects velocity banking. So we looked at goals in the last video. So in this video, we're going to look at budget. So budget is one of the biggest topics for me personally when it comes to velocity banking. You see all these videos on velocity banking, how people can get out of debt really quick. You get all excited and you go and get a line of credit because that's the main focus, right? You want to get a revolving simple interest line of credit, and then you want to chuck your amortized debt onto that line of credit. So you go out and you get a line of credit. Now, if you're watching a video, we talked a lot about this in the goals. If you're watching a video and you're like, you're in debt, you're deep in debt, something got you that deep in debt, and it was probably a habit that you have. Like you gotta understand in your mind that budget, doing velocity banking is gonna actually take work. It's gonna take it's time. You have to train your brain to think in a way that it hasn't thought before. You're gonna have to give up some stuff. You need to tell yourself this before you start velocity banking. Don't just look at it and say, I'm going to jump in and do that. Understand what you're about to do and tell yourself, hey, we're about to go through some pain. We're about to go through some brain pain, because you're going to have to deny yourself and do things. I mean, I would say everyone who starts velocity banking, at the very least, should get a spreadsheet out and see how it's going to affect you, by knowing how much cash you're going to stick in your line of credit and being able to hold it there. It's going to affect you. And budget is really the steering wheel of the entire velocity banking. So let's talk about budget for just a couple minutes here. So, when it comes to budget and people I'm working with, people I talk to, I ask them to have a budget. Most people don't even have a budget. They pay their bills and whatever left, they're good to go. They just, without thought, they'll just buy anything, go out to eat anytime they want. No thought process at all. So creating a budget, when I ask people, well, if you created a budget, what would your budget be? And so they'll say, I think I'll make my budget $1,000 a month. And I'm like, oh, okay, how'd you come up with that number? Well, I don't know. I just think that $1,000 a month would be enough of a budget so I don't overspend. See, and that's where, I just like, oh my God, because people, they don't even know how much money they make, much less how much of a budget they can have. People will just throw out numbers. Oh, I'm going to make my budget $1,200 a month. Oh, I think I'll make my budget $500 a month. Okay, so this is where, budget, goals, discipline, it all goes hand in hand. So I'm going to show you guys how to make a budget just really quick. So first thing you do is you'll list out all your bills. And let's say that your bills come out to $3,500 a month. Then you would list your income. And when I say list bills, list income, don't sit there and say, okay, I pay $1,200 for rent. I pay $400 for utilities. Don't do that. Literally go grab your statement. Go to, if you use your bank card, your actual debit card from your checking account, and you use credit cards sometimes, over a 3-month period, look at the statement in which every account that you spent from, and go through. And if it's something like, oh, I spent a coffee every now and then, kind of separate those. And then what you want to do is you want to take your total monthly expenses, so like utilities, things that you pay every month, put that in one column, and then add up that little coffee once in a while, just a random miscellaneous expenses, and add that up kind of like miscellaneous expense. So let's say you have a total, and after researching it, you have a total of 3,500 for bills, and this will include just bills, not like groceries or random. This is just everyday expenses, and you can tack on like a little miscellaneous just to have that in there. Next, you want to add your income. Now, income, same way. Don't kind of guess. Literally go back, look at your checks, over the last 3 months, and then average it out. Do an average. A lot of times people checks aren't the same, so do an average. So once you have your income, once you have your bill total, then you'll have your cash flow. Now, if your cash flow should be positive. If your cash flow isn't positive and you haven't even done your budget yet, you need to work on either increasing your income or finding out why you're spending so much on bills. You have to have a cash flow, and this cash flow at this point, that number should be really high because you haven't even created your budget. So again, it's important, guys, because every time I work with people, they seem to put their expenses, they seem to put stuff that's not really an expense. Especially if you're going to create a budget, you need to don't add in all the stuff that you would spend the budget on. So don't add budget into your expenses total yet. When you separate your expenses out, just do rent, utilities. Don't do like gas for the car. Don't put, if you pay tithes, don't put tithes. Well, tithes can go in the expense column. Don't put it in your budget. And if you pay, like groceries, don't put that. Unless you got a set amount grocery bill every month that doesn't change, and you know exactly how much you're going to spend, then you can itemize that into the expense column. But if you just kind of go get groceries here and there, don't put it in that total. So once and that's where people mess up, I think. And just make sure that when you're adding that up, don't count any natural desire, any needs, or any wants, I should say, like stopping at the store, gas, buying, miscellaneous things that you don't buy every month. Don't put that into your bills total or your expense column. So once you have all that, you get your cash flow. Now you can create a budget. Now there's no random number thrown out of there because your budget is your cash flow. And even before that, we need kind of like an emergency fund. I like the infinite banking concept, becoming your own banker. If you don't have that, or you don't want to do that, then you need to add another column in here, which is emergency. So, if you have your bills, you have your income, you have your bills total, you have your cash flow number. So now you need to create your budget. But before you create your budget, it's inevitable that something is going to happen in which you're not going to know where to take the money from, because now all of a sudden something has happened. Now, with the emergency fund, depending on your cash flow, you got to think about what you want to set your emergency fund at. And that emergency fund, the infinite banking process is perfect for this. But if you're not doing that, you're just trying to set up an emergency fund, you got to think of it this way. Okay, depending on your cash flow, you can hit this emergency fund all at once, or you can kind of make it kind of like a bill that you pay every month to build it up to a certain amount that you want. So emergency fund is basically a one-time amount that you set up and that you will need to replenish every time you have an emergency. So let's say that you're thinking about situations and you're like, okay, I may need new tires. That's probably going to cost me $400. Or what if my transmission goes out? That might cost me $1,800. Or if something happens, you could possibly include in this emergency fund, like Christmas. Just think of it that way. On Christmas, I'm gonna spend $800 on the kids. So you set a certain amount for emergency, and once you figure out what that amount's gonna be, think about your situation and what makes you feel comfortable. What would make you feel comfortable as a backup in case something happened? Okay, so let's say you decide that you want your emergency fund to be $2,500, right? And right, we already know your cash flow is $1,500. So what we need to do is you can itemize this out on your expenses. So on your total expenses that you'll just, let's say all you're going to do is $100. So you have a total of $100 added. You'll just add that as another line in the bills that you pay every month, and understand that this is only temporary, right? It's basically going to take you 25 months to reach that, but once it's reached, you'll have that emergency fund set up. And the fact that you couldn't, pay it all at once, it doesn't matter. It's all about, right? It's all about going back to those goals, that planning, and understanding that you're going to have, if you're going to start velocity banking, you got to create a budget, right? And in everything we do, we start to understand. We always think back to that runner whose shins are going to start hurting, who's going to get tired, who's going to have to mentally prepare and understand that this is going to happen to me when I start running, and I'm already prepared and ready for it, and I'm going to push through it, versus just going out there with no process or no plan. You're going to fail. So by creating a budget, naturally, by doing velocity banking, that you have to find your numbers. You have to find what your income is. You have to find out what your expenses are, and you have to find out what your cash flow is. And then once you do that, you need to understand that, okay, that's what I'm saying my numbers is, but what I need a budget, because what am I going to do when I need food or I need gas for the car? I didn't add that yet, so I have to create a budget, and I have to stick to that budget. Well, now we're looking at budget. Well, what happens? Budget is going to have some pain with it also, right? Because now an unexpected expense is going to come up. The only free money you have is your budget, and you can't pay that with budget. Okay, so we need to now mentally prepare for that. So how do we do that? Well, in order to mentally prepare for that pain that's going to come with the budget, right? You have pain with velocity banking. You have pain with your income because it's probably not enough. You have pain with your bills because you're probably going to have to reduce them. And now you got pain with your budget because you're going to have to spend your budget money on something you didn't plan for. So how do we prepare for all this? We now create an emergency fund. Well, there's some pain with the emergency fund because you don't have enough cash to fund your emergency fund. So now I need to reduce my cash flow to create this emergency fund. Whether you have enough to pay it outright or you don't, even if it's $50, you go off of what your cash flow is to create each of these steps. So we create the emergency fund that we want, which is going to be $2,500 a month. In order to reach that, we're going to pay $100 a month on our itemized bills. We're going to have that we're basically going to look at it like it's a bill every month that we need to pay. It's a $2,500 loan that we're paying back. So we're going to pay that. But the good thing is we can set how much we want to pay. So we're going to set that at $100. That's going to reduce our cash flow. So our cash flow is now $1,400. And before we get off of emergency, we know that our emergency fund is $2,500. So, emergency, you got to look at it like think of it kind of like it's a loan, right? You're going to take a loan if something happens. So let's say, you're building this up, to try to get to the 2,500. And let's say that you're in month 5. So that means so far you built up 500. And guys, this part is so important. If you want to succeed, building wealth, there's so much involved to it. There's little steps. There's little things that you train your brain to do, your subconscious, to where you do these things no matter what. And discipline, budget, those are the driving force of all of this. This is a business plan for your life, right? You have to look at every area and what exactly are you going to do. So let's say that this emergency fund is up to 500. You're building your way up to reach your maximum amount or whatever amount that wants you to be. Again, I can't stress the importance. I would do this inside of your infinite banking, but we're looking at it in the simplest form. This could be just a savings account. This could be emergency. Well, I'll get into that in a minute, but let's continue on with this thought. So you have 500. Now let's say all of a sudden you have a flat tire, and that flat tire, obviously this wasn't a part of your budget. Anything that happens outside of your budget that you didn't plan to be in your budget is what you would use your emergency fund for. So let's say that you're at 500. Now you have a flat tire. That flat tire you bust a tire. In order to get a new tire, it's going to cost you $80. Now, this is where people differ. Now, if you wanted to take that out of your budget, you could, and you just suffer through the rest of the month. But if you want your budget, you're like, no, I set my budget because I want my coffee. I want my certain things, right? Everybody is different. It doesn't matter where you take the budget. That's where the difference in people. The actual plan that you created is solid. The plan works. Your personality, your discipline level, wherever you feel or want is where it can change. But the underlying fact of this is at its core is already set. You don't change this. So let's say you did take that $80 out of your emergency fund, right? You're going to withdraw $80. You're going to pay for it. You got a new tire. You're back on the road. You're back moving again. So now let's look at the emergency fund. Your emergency fund is $420. And what did you do? You took a loan from your emergency fund to pay for a tire, right? So now you need to create a loan for this $420. So this depends on, again, the whole core of this continues to keep moving, but now this is where it'll differ again, because now you got to make payments on the $420. So as far as the $2,500, you still making that $100 payments to this. This doesn't change. That never changes until you reach $2,500. Once you reach $2,500, you no longer have to pay that. But if something happens on that way, right, on that road to 2,500, which is the 420 that now came out, you now have to create a payment back because you just took another loan out. So this 420, this is where I say people can differ, right? We know we have 1,400 left in the budget, or in our cash flow is 1,400. We haven't created the budget yet. We have 1,400 in the cash flow. So you don't want to lower your cash flow too much. This is where you have to kind of decide, okay, I can pay $20 a month to this, or $25 a month, or $80 a month, or $100 a month on top of the other 100. You never stop paying that 100 if you haven't reached your 2,500 yet. So if you haven't reached this 2,500, that $100 still needs to be paid. But in addition to that, you got to start paying this back also. So let's say you decide you want to do $20. You need to go to your bills that you already have planned out, and this works best on a spreadsheet. You need to add another line and put like loan 2 or something like that, and then you need to add $20 to that. So now your expenses are going to go up, and your expenses will now be $36.20, and your cash flow will be $13.80. So this little part was just on emergency and how to get to the 2,500. Once that 2,500 is paid, your expense total will renew back to its original amount, which is 3,500. Once you reach the 2,500 and you pay off any loans on that. But that's how you discipline yourself. That's how you keep working towards that 2,500 emergency. Okay, so we know our income, we know our bills total, we have our emergency fund, we know how the emergency fund, we understand. We did that example working on the way up to the 2,500, but if you had already reached the 2,500, anytime you use money out of the emergency fund, your cash flow is going to decrease because you need to pay that back. You need to set some type of payment plan to pay it back, and it will always stay. So once you hit the 2,500, the good thing is your cash flow returns to its max amount after based off your income and your expenses. You have your max amount of cash flow. The emergency fund, that cash flow, understand, will be reduced anytime there's an emergency fund. You just take the money out of the emergency fund, take care of whatever it is you need to take care of, and then you pay yourself back to your emergency fund. So now that we've done all that, where I asked somebody, hey, how much is your budget? And they threw out a random number. Here we are. We've done all of this just to figure out what we can actually have as a budget. There's that opinion out there that I work hard, I should do whatever I want. Hey, you can do whatever you want, but your lifestyle is going to reflect that. Do you work hard and you should be able to do everything you want, or are you working hard towards a future and a lifestyle that you want? That's the question you really got to ask yourself. So now that we have got all of our numbers, now we can create our budget. So we'll create our budget from our cash flow. So we have a cash flow of $1,500. Now you can go back through those bills, right? You look at every account in which money was being debited out of your account. If it was a combination of a credit card and a bank, you would pull both of those statements. If it was just a credit card, you would pull that statement. If it was just your bank account, you would pull that statement. But look, give yourself at least 3 months. And once you have that, look back over and say, okay, I'm averaging about $25 a month in gas, or $25 a week. I mean, if you're spending $25 a month, you're lucky. $25 a week in gas, so that's about $100 a month. And then you look and you're like, okay, I see that I stopped in the store, I bought a 20-ounce soda. I stopped in the store, I bought a coffee. You add all of that up, and then you think to yourself, is this something that I want to cut back on? Am I going to deny myself all of this? I mean, if you're looking at that guy running, you might not want to be buying soda. It all goes hand in hand. When you start to look at life like this, you're going to see that, whoa, this is cool. Like, everything affects everything. And that's why budget is the steering wheel when it comes to velocity banking. So you look at it and you're like, you know what? I like my coffee. I want to do, you look at all these miscellaneous, you kind of add it up and say, okay, I'm going to give myself a miscellaneous amount of, let's say you're buying a $4 cup of coffee 3 times a week. That's 12, $24, $48. So, and you're like, okay, there's nothing else really on here. I'm going to do that. I'm going to make my miscellaneous $50. And then if you haven't itemized groceries out, you got to look at groceries, and you got to be like, okay, groceries, it looks like, I go shopping once a week. I'm spending about, 120 a week on groceries. I feel like I can stick within that budget. I feel like I can limit myself to 120. I can get everything I need. So you look at a month's worth, you're like, okay, I could spend $480 on food. And then, if you, let's say, work lunches, you go out to eat every now and then, you're like, I'm not going to do that often. I'm going to go maybe every other Friday, I'm going to go out to eat, and it's going to cost, I'm going to stick to like a $10 budget. Just sometimes you get tired of packing lunches. Sometimes you get tired of a same routine and you want to do something different. And, you know what, I'm going to, it is important on me to pay off debt and get out of debt, but at the same time, let me be real with myself. And I know that every now and then I'm going to want to do something different. And so you're like, man, what do I do here? Because it's really important you got debt. You're like, okay, well, I tell you what, I'm going to spend a total of $20 a month, where I can choose, split that up between 2 days, or I can go do 1 day and have something, something extra. So, you kind of add that to your miscellaneous total, another $20 a month. And you would continue to keep going through that, and just be real with yourself. Be really real with yourself. Add up, put everything in there you want. Don't short yourself, because you don't want to burn yourself out either. You look at that guy out there running, you never ran. You go out there and you're like, okay, I'm going to push myself to a mile. Can you do it? I believe anything is possible with the human mind, but at the same time, you're like, why not run a quarter mile and work your way up towards that? You start, you don't want to just put yourself in the hospital. And the same thing here, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where, okay, I'm spending a little bit more. You know that, man, every now and then, I don't know, I like to go to the casino and spend $100. It's like, kind of add a little extra, put an extra $30 to your miscellaneous. You don't have to actually, just because you have a budget of $600, you don't actually have to spend $600. And I think once you train your mind, your subconscious start telling your mind, hey, to reach this goal, we need to do this, you're going to naturally start probably decreasing your budget in the first place. Your life is done a 180. You're gonna definitely start going in a different direction. So that's why budget is kind of the steering wheel, because if you did that, let's say you didn't, right, you're headed in a direction towards being debt free. And if you don't put the time and effort into creating your budget, you're heading up, right? You're digging yourself out of this pit that you're in, and you're heading towards becoming debt free. But there's things, right? If you never created that emergency fund and something happens, right? Because these arrows represent the cash flow that's sitting in the line of credit. Well, that's going to start pushing you towards a certain direction, right? Which is your goal to be debt free. But let's say you didn't create that emergency fund, right? Something's going to happen and you're going to have to pay for it, which is going to start to turn that wheel towards more debt. Why? Because that pushing you towards debt free depends on how much money is sitting in that line of credit. If there's less sitting in that line of credit, it's going to start pushing you more in a straight or neutral direction. And then let's say you didn't really compensate your budget, and then like I said, I've said this, many times on rare occasions, that velocity banking is actually kind of boring. It's boring because now all you're doing is you used to be able to just go out, do things. Now you're just sitting around the house. You're not doing anything because you're waiting. You have to keep the money in that line of credit. So that's why don't short yourself on the budget, because every now and then everybody needs to be able to do something. You need to be able to take a break. So if you don't do that and you didn't really budget for that, then this steering wheel is going to start to turn more and more to the right, and you're going to start going back down towards debt again. The fact that you started this is probably going to help you start again to push back up after you get through that weekend or whatever. You're probably going to get back on track, but what's going to happen is you're going to more than likely end up just going in a straight line. So velocity banking wasn't really effective. You're not really, you have those ups, right? Because you're sticking the money in the line of credit. You're happy. You're doing everything. But then all of a sudden, you're going to find out, man, I can't do anything. And that's what I've been doing my whole life. Your brain is going to try it. And this is where you got to have that discipline to keep that. You got to hold on hard onto that steering wheel and keep it. Don't let it turn. Because if it starts turning, you're going to go back and forth like this. And you're going to start going towards debt free. Then you're going to start going towards more debt. Then you're going to start going back to where you're going to be more like swerving. You got to keep a steady hand on that wheel. And by planning, by creating that emergency fund, by, not shorting yourself on the budget, you're going to be able to turn that steering wheel to the left and hold it with firm hands and keep it going in the direction to where you want to go. It's going to help you reach your goals. And guys, you see how long this video was. It's just because budget is so important. There's so many components within budget. Budget contains human emotion. It contains the steering wheel for velocity banking. It's the steering wheel for getting out of debt. It is probably the single most important part of all of this, because without a budget, without goals, without knowing where you are and where you're going, you're just tossing out numbers out there. Don't even really understand the concept at all. And you're swerving. You're swerving all over the place, and you're not really getting it going anywhere. A year after doing velocity banking, you're back at the same spot. You really it's kind of like you love the fact that you're doing a strategy without actually seeing any results from that strategy. And you're just going up and down. You're just swerving all over the place, and you don't even know where you're trying to get to. So guys, make sure you set goals. Make sure you set a budget. It's important. You can't just throw out numbers. You got to understand your numbers and push it. This is what makes you effective. You are the manager of your own business. And if someone is looking at you, how are they? I'm sure you've been to restaurants or been to places and you're like, let me speak to your manager. Everybody has that come up at one time or another. And if somebody is looking at your business, which is your family business, how you're reaching your goals, budget, whatever, they're going to be like, this is a poorly ran business. What is your business model and what does it look like? What is your business plan? Do you even have a business plan? You know, so guys, I hope you found value in this video. If you did, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.